Have you ever looked at a photograph and been absolutely certain of what you were seeing, only to discover later that your perception was utterly, irrevocably wrong? It's a chilling feeling, isn't it? That unsettling moment when reality twists, and the ground beneath your feet seems to shift. Tonight, we're going to delve into a story that takes that feeling and amplifies it, stretches it to its breaking point, and exposes the fragile nature of identity and perception. Imagine a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where the lawns are meticulously manicured and the laughter of children echoes in the late afternoon sun. In one of these seemingly idyllic homes lived a couple, Sarah and Mark. To the outside world, they were the picture of domestic bliss. Sarah, with her warm smile and kind eyes, was the heart of their small social circle. Mark, a dependable and hardworking man, was her steadfast partner. They hosted cozy dinner parties, took annual vacations, and navigated the everyday ups and downs of life with a comfortable rhythm. Their photo albums were filled with smiling snapshots, tangible proof of a life well lived, a love story unfolding in gentle, predictable chapters. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, something was amiss. Not a dramatic, earth-shattering secret, not at first. It started with small, almost imperceptible inconsistencies. A fleeting look of sadness in Sarah's eyes that vanished too quickly to be questioned. A subtle hesitation in Mark's voice when he spoke of their early years together. These were the whispers on the wind, the faint tremors before the earthquake. No one noticed, or perhaps no one wanted to notice. It's easier to accept the surface, the story that's presented, than to delve into the murky depths of what might lie beneath. Then came the photos. It started innocently enough. An old box of family pictures unearthed during a spring cleaning. Sarah and Mark spent an evening reminiscing, laughing at the awkward hairstyles and dated fashions of their younger selves. Among these were pictures from Mark's childhood, his teenage years, and his early 20s before he had met Sarah. There were images of family vacations, school dances, and gatherings with friends. And then, there were the photos with her. A woman with striking features, dark hair, and an intense gaze appeared in several of these older photographs. She was often seen with Mark, sometimes laughing, sometimes holding hands, always close. Sarah naturally assumed this was a former girlfriend, a chapter in Mark's life before she came along. She asked Mark about her, a casual inquiry, expecting a brief explanation, a name, a few anecdotes. But Mark's reaction was odd. He seemed flustered, his smile faltered, and he quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation towards a funny story from his college days. Sarah, though slightly curious, didn't press. Everyone has a past, she reasoned, and some memories are best left undisturbed. However, the woman in the photos kept resurfacing in her mind. There was something about her eyes, a familiar intensity that Sarah couldn't quite place. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself drawn back to the box of old photos, lingering over the images of this unknown woman. She started to notice details she had missed before. A small birthmark on her left hand, the way she tilted her head when she smiled, a certain elegant posture. It was at a neighborhood barbecue that the first seed of true unease was planted. An old friend of Mark's, someone Sarah had met only a few times, was looking through some of the framed photos displayed in their living room. He stopped at a picture of Mark from his early 20s, the woman with dark hair standing beside him. Ah, Mark, and what was her name again? You guys were quite the item back then, he said with a nostalgic smile. Before Mark could answer, Sarah, wanting to bridge the awkwardness of not knowing this part of her husband's past, chimed in, "Yes, these old photos are so interesting. Mark hasn't mentioned her much." The friend's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion, almost disbelief. He stared at Sarah, then back at the photograph and then back at Sarah again. "Mark hasn't mentioned Olivia?" he stammered, his voice laced with bewilderment. "But you look just like her, Sarah. It's uncanny." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. She glanced at Mark, who was now pale and visibly uncomfortable. He tried to laugh it off, saying something about people often mistaking one person for another, but the friend's words hung heavy in the air. No, the friend insisted, shaking his head. It's not just a passing resemblance. You could be twins. Everyone always said so back then. Mark and Olivia, and now you, Sarah. He trailed off, his eyes still fixed on Sarah with a mixture of shock and something else she couldn't quite decipher. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The friend's words echoed in her mind. You look just like her. It's uncanny. Everyone always said so back then. She got out of bed and retrieved the box of photos. Under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, she studied the woman named Olivia. She compared her own reflection in the darkened window to the images in her hand. And a terrifying realization began to dawn. The friend was right. It wasn't just a slight similarity. The resemblance was striking, almost identical. The same dark hair, the same intense gaze, the same small birthmark on the left hand. Even the way she held herself, the subtle tilt of her head. It was all there. It was like looking at a younger version of herself, a ghost from a past she knew nothing about. And Mark had never mentioned her. Not once. The next morning, Sarah confronted Mark. The casual curiosity was gone, replaced by a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She showed him the photos, pointed out the undeniable similarities. She asked him about Olivia, about their relationship, about why he had never spoken of her. Mark's initial discomfort morphed into something darker, something akin to fear. He became evasive, his answers vague and contradictory. He insisted that Olivia was just an old friend, someone he had lost touch with years ago. He downplayed the intensity of their relationship, brushed aside the friend's comments as an exaggeration. But Sarah knew he wasn't telling her the truth. She could see it in his eyes, in the tremor in his voice, in the way he avoided her gaze. The more he tried to dismiss it, the more convinced she became that Olivia was not just a casual acquaintance from his past. She was something more, something significant, something deliberately hidden. And the chilling question that began to form in Sarah's mind, the question that would haunt her waking hours and fill her dreams with unease, was this. If this woman looked so much like her, was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more sinister at play? Was her life with Mark built on a foundation of secrets, a carefully constructed illusion where she was unknowingly cast in a role that was not originally her own? The comfortable rhythm of their life had been shattered, replaced by a discordant melody of suspicion and fear. The predictable chapters of their love story had taken a dark and unexpected turn. And Sarah knew, with a growing sense of dread, that her search for the truth about Olivia would unravel more than just her husband's past. It might unravel her entire present. Sarah's investigation began subtly, a quiet exploration into the dusty corners of Mark's past. She started with the obvious, social media. She searched for the name Olivia connected to their town, to Mark's high school, to any of the places he had lived before they met. But it was like searching for a ghost. There were numerous Olivias, their faces and lives blurring into an indistinguishable mass. None of them matched the woman in the photos. It was as if Olivia had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only faded images and unsettling questions. She casually brought up Olivia's name in conversations with other longtime acquaintances of Mark's, hoping for a slip, a revealing anecdote. But everyone she spoke to either didn't know an Olivia from Mark's past, or their recollections were vague and unhelpful. It was as if a collective amnesia surrounded this woman, a deliberate silence that only fueled Sarah's suspicion. One rainy afternoon, while Mark was at work, Sarah decided to take a more direct approach. She went back to the attic, to the box of old photos. This time, she meticulously examined each image, searching for any clue, any detail that might shed light on Olivia's identity. On the back of one photo, tucked away in a corner, she found a name scrawled in faded ink, Olivia R. It was a small detail, but it was something. A last name, or at least an initial. Armed with this new piece of information, Sarah's search intensified. She tried online directories, public records, anything that might connect an Olivia R. to Mark's history. Days turned into sleepless nights as she delved deeper into the digital archives, her anxiety growing with each dead end. Then, almost by chance, she stumbled upon an old newspaper article online. It was a brief report about a car accident that had occurred several years before Mark and Sarah had met. The names of the victims were listed, and one name jumped out at Sarah: Olivia Reyes. The article mentioned that Olivia was in her early 20s at the time of the accident and had sustained serious injuries. There was no follow-up article detailing her recovery, or lack thereof. A cold dread washed over Sarah. Reyes. The R on the back of the photo. It had to be her. But why had Mark never mentioned this? A serious car accident involving a close friend, someone he had clearly been romantically involved with. It was the kind of event that leaves a lasting impact, a story that would surely be shared with a spouse. Unless the outcome of the accident was something he wanted to keep hidden. Driven by a gnawing unease, Sarah tried to find more information about the accident, about Olivia Reyes. She scoured online databases, contacted local historical societies, even visited the library to look through microfilm of old newspapers. It was a painstaking process, but slowly, fragments of Olivia's story began to emerge. Olivia Reyes had been a vibrant young woman, known for her artistic talent and her infectious laugh. She and Mark had been inseparable during their late teens and early 20s, a couple everyone in their small town had expected to get married. The car accident had been a tragedy, a sudden and brutal interruption of a promising life. But the details surrounding the accident were hazy, contradictory. Some reports mentioned a single car collision, others hinted at the involvement of another vehicle that had fled the scene. The extent of Olivia's injuries was also unclear. Some accounts suggested a full recovery was unlikely, while others were less specific. As Sarah pieced together these fragments, a disturbing picture began to form. What if Olivia hadn't survived the accident? What if Mark had been involved in some way, perhaps even responsible? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the key to understanding his secrecy, his discomfort whenever Olivia's name was mentioned. Sarah knew she had to confront Mark again, armed with the information she had uncovered. This time, she wouldn't be asking vague questions based on old photographs. She had a name, a potential tragedy, a connection to his past that he had actively concealed. When Mark came home that evening, Sarah was waiting for him. The old newspaper article lay on the kitchen table between them. The atmosphere in the room was thick with unspoken accusations and rising tension. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I found something." She slid the article across the table towards him. He paled visibly as his eyes scanned the headline and then the name. Olivia Reyes. He didn't say a word, his gaze fixed on the faded print. "Who was she, Mark?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The friend in the photos? The one I look so much like? The one who was in this accident?" For a long moment, he remained silent, his face a mask of anguish and fear. Then he finally spoke, his voice hoarse and filled with a pain that seemed to reach the very depths of his soul. "Olivia. Olivia was everything to me," he confessed, his eyes welling up with tears. "We were going to get married. We had our whole lives planned out." He went on to tell her about their relationship, their dreams, their hopes for the future. He spoke of Olivia with a tenderness and a passion that Sarah had never witnessed in him before. It was like a dam had broken, and years of suppressed emotions were finally pouring forth. Then he recounted the day of the accident. They had been driving home from a weekend getaway, a trip filled with laughter and whispered promises. He was behind the wheel. A sudden downpour had made the roads treacherous. A deer had darted out in front of them. He had swerved to avoid it, lost control of the car. His voice broke as he described the aftermath. The sirens, the flashing lights, the agonizing wait at the hospital. He told Sarah how Olivia had suffered severe head trauma, how she had clung to life for weeks, and how, eventually, she had succumbed to her injuries. Sarah listened in stunned silence, her heart aching for the young couple whose lives had been so tragically cut short. But amidst the sadness, a nagging question remained. If Olivia's death was the reason for Mark's silence, why the secrecy? Why the evasiveness? Why act as if Olivia was just a distant memory, a casual acquaintance? "Mark," she said softly, I understand that this was a terrible loss for you, but why didn't you ever tell me? Why pretend she was nothing more than an old friend? His eyes flickered with a flicker of something unreadable, guilt, shame, fear, before he looked away. It was too painful, he whispered. I couldn't bring myself to talk about her. And then, when I met you, you looked so much like her. It was like a second chance. I wanted to forget the pain, to start over. I was afraid that if I told you about Olivia, you wouldn't want me. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken grief and a desperate attempt to rewrite the past. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, sympathy for the young man who had lost his love, confusion over his deception, and a growing unease about the implications of her uncanny resemblance to Olivia. As the night wore on, Mark revealed more fragments of his past with Olivia, painting a vivid picture of their life together. He showed Sarah more photos, letters, mementos, tangible pieces of a love story that had ended too soon. But with each revelation, the mystery deepened. Why had no one else mentioned the striking resemblance between Sarah and Olivia? Mark's old friend at the barbecue had acted as if it was common knowledge. And then, Mark said something that sent a fresh wave of chills down Sarah's spine. He mentioned a detail about Olivia, a small, almost insignificant detail about a childhood illness she had overcome, a rare condition that left a faint, barely visible mark on her skin. A mark in the exact same place as a similar, barely visible mark that Sarah herself had. The coincidence was too much, felt too deliberate, too orchestrated. Sarah looked at Mark, really looked at him, and a terrifying thought took root in her mind. Had their meeting been a coincidence at all? Had he sought her out because of her resemblance to Olivia? Was she living a life that was meant for someone else? A replacement for a love lost? The comfortable life she thought she had built with Mark suddenly felt fragile, built on a foundation of secrets and a resemblance that was far more than skin deep. The shadows of the past were creeping into her present, and Sarah knew that the truth about Olivia and about Mark was far more complex and far more disturbing than she could have ever imagined. The revelation about the childhood illness and the matching mark on their skin sent a seismic shock through Sarah's understanding of her relationship with Mark. The coincidences had piled up, one after another, creating a disquieting sense that her life was somehow intertwined with Olivia's in a way she couldn't comprehend. The idea that Mark might have been drawn to her solely because of her resemblance to his deceased love was deeply unsettling, casting a shadow over the authenticity of their entire relationship. Was she loved for who she was or for who she looked like? Sarah couldn't let it go. She needed to understand the depth of this connection, this eerie mirroring between her life and Olivia's past. She decided to delve deeper into Olivia's life, to try and understand who this woman was beyond the faded photographs and Mark's tearful recollections. She started by seeking out anyone who had known Olivia. It wasn't easy. Years had passed, and memories fade. But through persistent effort, she managed to connect with a few of Olivia's old friends from high school. They remembered Olivia fondly, describing her as vibrant, artistic, and full of life. And yes, they all mentioned the striking resemblance to Sarah. It wasn't just Sarah's perception. It was a widely acknowledged fact from years ago. One of Olivia's closest friends, a woman named Emily, agreed to meet Sarah for coffee. Emily was hesitant at first, clearly still affected by the tragedy of Olivia's death. But as Sarah shared her own story, her confusion and her growing sense of unease, Emily's demeanor softened. "It was always so strange," Emily said, her voice tinged with a lingering sadness. "After the accident, Mark changed. He withdrew. We all did, in a way. It was such a loss. And then, years later, when I saw you at the grocery store with him, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like seeing Olivia again. I almost called out her name." Emily went on to share more details about Olivia's life, her dreams of becoming a painter, her quirky sense of humor, the small details that made her unique. As Sarah listened, she felt a strange sense of connection to this woman she had never met, this ghost from her husband's past who seemed to hold a key to her own present. Then, Emily revealed something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Olivia had a sister," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A twin sister. Her name was Sarah. The coffee cup trembled in Sarah's hand. Olivia had a twin sister named Sarah. The resemblance to Olivia wasn't a bizarre coincidence. It was a genetic link. But Mark had never mentioned a twin sister. Why? Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together this shocking new information. Could it be possible? Had she somehow been unaware of her own twin? It seemed impossible, absurd. She had no memories of a twin sister, no family history that suggested one. But the more she thought about it, the more unsettling details began to surface from her own past. Vague memories of feeling like a part of her was missing, an inexplicable sense of longing she had never been able to articulate, a childhood fascination with stories about twins, a feeling of resonance that now seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Sarah confronted Mark again. This time she didn't ask. She demanded. She told him what she had learned from Emily, the existence of Olivia's twin sister, Sarah. Mark's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. He broke down, confessing the truth, a truth far more convoluted and disturbing than Sarah could have ever imagined. Olivia and Sarah were indeed identical twins. They had been separated at birth, a secret their parents had guarded fiercely. Mark had been deeply in love with Olivia. After her death, consumed by grief and a desperate desire to recapture what he had lost, he had embarked on a relentless search for Olivia's twin sister. He had learned about the separation, had tracked Sarah down, and had deliberately orchestrated their meeting. His entire relationship with Sarah had been built on this foundation of deception. He hadn't fallen in love with her for who she was. He had seen her as a living reminder of Olivia, a second chance to love the woman he had lost. The shared childhood illness, the matching mark on their skin, it was all part of the same genetic inheritance that made them look identical. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Her entire life, her marriage, her sense of identity, it was all a lie. She was living a life that was meant for her sister, a life shaped by the ghost of a woman she had never known. The man she loved hadn't truly loved her. He had loved the image of someone else reflected in her face. But the revelations didn't end there. As Mark continued his confession, the story took an even darker turn. He admitted that he had been with Olivia on the night of the car accident. But he hadn't been driving. Olivia had been behind the wheel, and she had been under the influence of alcohol. He had tried to stop her, but she hadn't listened. The accident wasn't caused by a deer. It was a result of Olivia's impaired driving. He had lied to the police, to Olivia's family, to everyone. He had allowed them to believe it was a tragic accident caused by unforeseen circumstances. He had carried the burden of that lie for years, a secret that had haunted his every waking moment. And when he found Sarah, he saw it as a chance to escape that guilt, to create a new reality where the past didn't exist. The weight of his confessions was crushing. Sarah felt betrayed, heartbroken, and utterly lost. The man she thought she knew was a stranger, a man consumed by grief and driven by a desperate need to rewrite his own history. In the aftermath of Mark's shocking revelations, Sarah was left reeling. Her marriage was a sham, her identity intertwined with a twin sister she never knew existed, and her husband was living a lie built on a foundation of guilt and deception. The idyllic life she thought she had was shattered, replaced by a harsh and painful reality. The climax of the story had arrived, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a cascade of devastating truths that ripped apart the fabric of her existence. Now, Sarah had to face the daunting task of picking up the pieces and deciding what her future held in this new, terrifying landscape. The secrets had been revealed, but the consequences were far from over. In the immediate aftermath of Mark's confessions, Sarah felt numb. The sheer weight of the revelations, the existence of her twin, Olivia, their separation at birth, Mark's deliberate manipulation of their relationship, and his lie about the car accident, was almost too much to bear. The life she had known had dissolved, leaving behind a void filled with betrayal and uncertainty. She asked Mark to leave. She needed space, time to process the enormity of what she had learned. He didn't argue. His guilt was palpable, his eyes filled with a profound sorrow. He packed a bag and quietly left the house they had shared, the home that now felt like a stage for a tragic play. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself grappling with a multitude of emotions. Anger at Mark's deception, grief for the sister she never knew, confusion about her own identity. Was she truly Sarah, or was she just a stand-in for Olivia? Had any part of her relationship with Mark been real? She reached out to Emily, Olivia's friend, who became an unexpected source of support. Emily confirmed the story of the twins' separation, a decision made by their parents decades ago for reasons that remained unclear. Emily also shared more memories of Olivia, helping Sarah to piece together a picture of the sister she never had the chance to know. Through Emily's stories, Olivia began to feel less like a ghost and more like a real person, a vibrant young woman with her own hopes and dreams. As Sarah processed the information, she began to understand the depth of Mark's pain and his misguided attempt to find solace in her resemblance to Olivia. While his actions were unforgivable, she could at least comprehend the desperation that had driven him. She also realized that she couldn't let her life be defined by Mark's deception or by the shadow of her twin sister. She was her own person with her own experiences and her own identity. The resemblance to Olivia was a part of her history, but it didn't dictate her future. After several weeks of separation and soul-searching, Sarah agreed to meet with Mark. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and raw emotions. Mark expressed his deep remorse for his lies and the pain he had caused her. He didn't try to excuse his actions, acknowledging the profound betrayal Sarah had experienced. Sarah, in turn, spoke of her hurt and confusion. She told him that she didn't know if she could ever fully trust him again, but she also recognized the genuine grief he had carried for so long. She admitted that learning about Olivia had been bittersweet, a sadness for a life lost, but also a strange sense of connection to a part of herself she had never known. Ultimately, Sarah decided that she couldn't continue the marriage. The foundation of trust had been irrevocably broken. They agreed to divorce, a painful but necessary step for both of them to move forward. In the months that followed, Sarah embarked on a journey of self-discovery. She explored her own interests and passions, things that had perhaps been overshadowed by the dynamic of her marriage. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a support system based on genuine connection and authenticity. She also made a conscious effort to learn more about Olivia. She spent time with Emily, looking through old photos, listening to stories, and visiting places that had been significant in Olivia's life. She even managed to find some of Olivia's artwork, pieces that revealed a talent and a sensitivity that resonated deeply with Sarah. Through this exploration, Sarah began to feel a sense of connection to her twin, a sense of shared history and understanding. The ending of Sarah's story is not one of fairy tale romance or neat resolution. There is a lingering sadness, a recognition of the pain and deception she endured. But there is also a sense of hope and resilience. Sarah emerged from the wreckage of her marriage with a stronger sense of self, a deeper understanding of her own identity, and a newfound connection to the sister she never knew. Life is rarely simple, and sometimes the people we think we know best are carrying the heaviest secrets. The photos that sparked this journey were indeed misleading, not because the woman in them wasn't real, but because their significance was far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. The truth, when it finally emerged, shattered illusions but also opened the door to a new, albeit more challenging, reality for Sarah. And so, we reach the end of this story, a story of mistaken identity, buried secrets, and the enduring search for truth. If you found this tale as captivating and thought-provoking as I did, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more intriguing stories, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unexpected corners of human experience. Thanks for watching.